What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Well, Francis Ngannou, Tyson Fury. First of all, congratulations to the Predator. I don't think anybody thought that Tyson Fury would be sitting on the canvas in that fight, much less that Francis would be competitive from start to finish. I think a lot of people thought maybe he'll have kind of a chance early to do something, but he'll fade towards the end. Tyson's going to pick up on his tendencies, and the big man's probably going to finish him in the later rounds or in the mid part of the fight. That is not at all what I saw. What I saw was a true robbery, and this is coming from a Tyson Fury fan. Francis Ngannou won that fight, and I cannot believe it.
Yeah, and when you watch the odds shift drastically, very quickly in Francis's favor as the fight was going on, a lot of that has to do with where the money's going, right? But everybody saw what we were seeing, and I'll be the first one to admit, my prediction for this fight was completely off. I thought Tyson Fury was going to go in there and outbox Francis Ngannou, who was going to try to go in there and look pretty and box with Tyson Fury. And in a lot of ways, he did do that. Now, of course, an MMA fighter who doesn't have any boxing fights under his belt is going to look a little bit awkward going against the current best fighter on the planet in boxing. But Francis Ngannou went out there and boxed. You know, he didn't try to do a ton of Superman punches. I know we saw one towards the end of the fight, and we didn't see a bunch of switch steps or anything like that. He went out there and kind of boxed Tyson Fury the way a boxer would. He just outboxed him. And it's so funny to me when you watch Tyson Fury go in there and not be able to implement his will, because every now and again, you'll see Tyson Fury in a fight where it's more difficult than he had anticipated it to be. And that's when he has to bite down on his mouthpiece. And then he starts to take a little bit more risks. He starts to be a little bit more aggressive with his offense. And I was waiting for that to happen after he got sat down by Francis Ngannou. But I think the power off of Francis's punches was deterring Tyson from doing that for the entire fight. And that's why Tyson kind of had to sit back and play boxing. You know, he was making his jab look really good. He was doing a lot of footwork that boxing judges and boxing fans love to see, none of which will help you win a fight, and none of which actually is deserving of getting your hand raised in a fight. But when you're watching a boxing match, people want to see you do these certain things and sort of like act a certain way. And Tyson Fury was able to do that, and that's what got him his hand raised. But this felt to me like the robbery of the century. This felt like the crossover match of the century, and Francis Ngannou deserved to get his hand raised. He had all of the biggest moments in this fight, and I believe even after the fight was over and they were going to the judges to find out who won the fight, Tyson Fury believed Francis was going to get his hand raised. But we all know how boxing is.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, but when you look at the fight as a whole, who landed the one knockdown? Francis.
Right.
Who landed the bigger shots throughout the fight? Certainly Francis.
Right.
Who was able to impose their will and confuse the other fighter more so than they were able to confuse you? Also Francis.
Right.
Yes, Tyson's got that nice long jab and he moves around and he's elusive, but I don't think he did enough in all of those rounds. Mm-hmm. Certainly not the 96-93 that one judge had it in his favor. Oh. I don't know what that judge was watching, but I truly believe that this was the most important crossover fight that we've seen to date.
100%.
Because if you think about it, Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather kind of started this whole crossover thing, but Floyd was past 40 years old at the time. Conor McGregor at that point in time was kind of, fighting MMA, doing boxing, being a celebrity, coming out with a whiskey brand. Right. So it was kind of 1 foot in boxing, 1 foot out. And then you look at the Jake Paul fights, and Jake Paul very much handpicks all of the MMA fighters that he wants to fight. He picks guys that are a couple of weight classes smaller than him, a couple of years past their prime. And I say a couple of years very graciously,
right,
well past their prime.
Mid-40s.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, over 40 years old.
Couple hip replacements.
Exactly,
like
yeah.
That.
This was not that. This was two of the baddest dudes in their respective sports.
Right.
In their primes, getting in there and competing in a boxing match. And that's what makes this so important. Now, if you want to know who really won this fight, all you have to do is go to our dear friend Dan Hewitt's Facebook page,
Shout
Boxing
out to
TV.
Dan.
Shout out to Dan. Great guy, great friend. We cover mostly MMA on this channel. Dan pretty much exclusively covers boxing. And his fans are, while they're great fans, they are heavily skewed towards the boxing side. And it was a slew of comments in his video. And they said, look, this was a robbery. I'm a boxing guy. I'm the first to say it. I thought Fury was going to get in there and finish him in 3 rounds. But at the end of the fight, I'm saying that Francis Ngannou got robbed. That, to me, speaks volumes. So we have to really look at what's ahead for Francis. And what the WBC said is that he's now going to be in the top 10 rankings come Monday. So when you look at the top 10 heavyweights in the world by the WBC standards, we don't know where exactly Francis is going to fall, but he will be in there, which allows him not to compete for a belt that was created for this event in Saudi Arabia, but to compete for the real, true heavyweight title, and not just in the WBC, and all of the organizations. And I'm quite sure that Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, Alexander Usyk, and the rest of the heavyweights all took note when the big man hit the canvas, and thereafter when Francis continued to win rounds against Tyson Fury.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's crazy to watch a comment section full of boxing fans that are hating the fact that they have to type these words out that Francis Ngannou beat Tyson Fury. But they're doing it because they're calling it how they see it. They saw it as an honest fight, that Francis Ngannou went in there and he outboxed Tyson Fury, and nobody saw it coming, certainly not me or anybody else that was tuning in to watch this fight. For me, it felt like at first, okay, this is just more of a spectacle. We've got the rappers singing before. We've got all the big entertainment and the star-studded event of all star-studded events. I mean, literally every seat in the front couple rows was just somebody majorly famous in whatever walk of life that they come from. And this thing quickly turned into a real fight, a very competitive boxing match. And it irked me a little bit to hear some of the commentary during the fight where they're saying this was one of the most competitive fights or one of the hardest fights Tyson Fury's ever been in. Correction, this was the hardest fight Tyson Fury's ever been in. It's the only fight on his professional record that he's ever lost. And you could see it on his face that he thought he lost that fight. And I just feel like, Francis Ngannou went out there, and without putting him to sleep, there was almost no chance that he was going to get his hand raised. Boxing could not afford to let their lineal heavyweight champion, the number one guy on the planet in boxing right now, lose to a guy who has an 0-0 professional record, a guy who they thought had no business being in there. And if Francis Ngannou would have been able to get the finish in there, it would have shaken the world of boxing up for good. I don't think boxing would have been able to recover if Tyson Fury wasn't able to get his hand raised in there. So kudos to him for making it go the distance. I don't really know if Tyson Fury is going to be very interested in doing a rematch with Ngannou, because usually a guy with the IQ and the boxing skill level that Tyson Fury has can dissect an opponent after 10 rounds and then come back in the rematch and really put a clinic on him. I don't think that Tyson Fury is going to want to engage with Francis Ngannou if they ever do have a rematch. And I think if they fought again, Francis Ngannou knows that, all right, I'm not in that much trouble. He definitely respects and fears my power to some degree. And if I walk him down, I know I can get this finish.
Yeah, and you're exactly right about the whole spectacle itself. When you look in the crowd, it's nothing but A-list celebrities, and the commentators are building up, Ronaldo's in the crowd, McGregor's in the crowd, this person, that person, people I've never heard of. I'm getting a little bit older now, and some of these young cats, I don't have any idea who they are, but apparently, judging by the roars when they come on camera, they're supposedly mega famous.
Right.
And then you've got the rappers on stage, and so it kind of felt to me, and with the ring walks and everything, like, man, everybody knows what's going to happen in this fight, and so they're trying to build the event to be bigger than the fight is going to actually be. And boy, did Francis ever flip the script on us. He really got in there and showed him, no, this is not just some fun event in Saudi Arabia that's being put on for your entertainment and there's going to be music and dancing and celebrities. No, this is a boxing match, and it's one that I'm going to win. And so the one thing I wish Francis would have done is not be so gracious in defeat. And I know that sounds bad to say that, but he should have contested that. He was like, I didn't get my hand raised today, but all credit to Tyson. I think I can beat him in the future. No, he should have said this was a robbery of the highest order. I landed the biggest shots. I knocked him down. I controlled the pace of that fight. And by the way, there's a guy named Alexander Usyk in the crowd that doesn't have a dance partner for December 23rd now, because I just beat up his dance partner and knocked him down, and he's going to need some time to recover. So how about you let me step in there for all those belts? I was praying that Francis did that. Unfortunately, he didn't. I think he could have stolen the fight with Usyk away from Fury had he done that.
100%. And Francis had the opportunity to become boxing's biggest heel. Now, he's much too nice of a guy, and he's way too candid of a character. What you see is what you get with Francis. He's not there like a Colby Covington or even like a Tyson Fury that's willing to ruffle the feathers and put on an act for the public. Francis is who Francis pretends or makes himself out to be. But last night, if he could have embodied a little bit of that inner Chael Sonnen, which we all have in us somewhere, even if it's very deep like in Francis, he should have come out and said, look, Alexander Usyk isn't coming in my ring unless he's coming to square off against me. I just took out the #1 lineal heavyweight champion in the world in Tyson Fury, and he's got such a cut on his head that's so bad he's not going to be able to fight till mid-part of 2024. If he wants to fight for a title, then he can put his belts up on the line against me. He could have come in and been the most controversial boxer after the most controversial boxing match that we've seen since Mayweather-McGregor. And I really think that if Francis would have gone out there and just lit the place on fire, after he's got the masses, he's got the internet, he's got the entire arena on his side feeling that he just won and he just did the impossible, which is beat Tyson Fury in a fight, I think that would have set up for an insane mega fight. It would have thrown him right in there, possibly with Usyk. And, you know, Usyk's the kind of guy who's such a good boxer and believes in his skill so much that he'd probably be licking his chops to get a chance at Francis Ngannou.
Oh, yeah.
Because anybody who's got the pedigree and the skills and the record of an Alexander Usyk and all the belts to prove he's as good as he is would love to get in there with a guy who's now 0-1 as a professional boxer.
And make all that money because Francis is bringing the bag with whoever he fights.
Right, and there's a lot of risk when Francis left the UFC, and everybody's like, well, what's going to happen? Is he going to find any big money? And then this sort of felt like, okay, this will be a sideshow thing. Tyson's going to beat him up, and then he's just going to leave boxing and never do it again. I believe Francis Ngannou is the #1 heavyweight boxer on the planet right now. I think if he wants to fight any of the top guys, especially the ones with the belts in Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury, he has every right and would likely be a favorite against some of them, especially Tyson Fury if he got to fight him again. I mean, the money line speaks for itself. When you have a guy who starts as a minus 1,400 favorite versus a guy who's like, you know, plus 1,000 underdog, and then 4 rounds into the fight, you see that completely shift over and it's like 2-1 in favor of Francis Ngannou. That means that the people are seeing something that we didn't realize we were going to see. And I think Francis Ngannou, with a few more months of good, strict boxing training, forget the PFL for right now. He needs to go right at the top contenders at the heavyweight boxing divisions and try to steal some of these belts. Get in, get out, make as much money as you possibly can, and steal as many belts as you can with as few fights as you possibly have to do.
Well, that's a good point, because if there was a loser last night, it would definitely be the PFL. And
right.
I know they have, you know, a lot to do with Francis right now, and they're very invested in the trajectory of his future post-UFC.
And they got a piece of last night, too.
Of course. But truth be told, there is no MMA fight right now that I want to see more than I want to see Francis Ngannou competing in boxing and continuing to fight these heavyweights, unless it's John Jones.
Yeah.
But we all know that's not going to happen because the UFC is just simply not going to play ball with the PFL. That fight's off the table. So who is the PFL going to bring in as a heavyweight who's not already contracted with the UFC to fight Francis that's more exciting than Francis versus Wilder, Francis versus Usyk, Francis versus Joshua, Francis versus Fury for the second time? I'm convinced there isn't a single person on the planet that's not John Jones that would be more exciting.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. And I have to say, Francis Ngannou has every opportunity right now to become the biggest name in all of boxing. If he can get a hold of one of those belts against one of these top guys in the world, you're talking about possibly the greatest story in all of combat sports history.
No doubt.